All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rob Presley with the Colorado Resiliency Office here in the Department of Local Affairs. And welcome to today's webinar, New Buildings, Energy Efficiency and Building Codes. Today's webinar is part of the CRO's Adaptations and Futures webinar series on climate change. So if this is your first time joining one of these webinars, we're glad you're here. And if you've attended some in the past, welcome back. This series is brought to you by the Colorado Resiliency Office, along with our partners from the Colorado Energy Office and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And with this series on climate change, we're seeking to equip local governments in Colorado with the tools, the resources, and the knowledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build a more resilient future. These webinars are held on the first Wednesdays of each month from 12 to 1. All of these webinars are being recorded, so you can view previous webinars or sign up for future ones at our website at www.coresiliency.com/webinars. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping for today. If you have any questions for our panelists, all of the attendees are on mute. So we encourage you to either use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to address your questions throughout the session. If you have any other questions or comments that you'd like to share with other panelists or other attendees, you can use the chat feature for that as well. And like I mentioned before, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted in the next couple of days on our website, again, at coresiliency.com/webinars. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Kim Burke, who will be moderating today's session with our panelists. And I'd like to introduce her as well. And Kim is a senior program manager at the Colorado Energy Office, where she develops and leads the Energy Office's building policy strategy and programs initiatives. Kim managed the state's building electrification market potential study and leads stakeholder outreach and coordination to advance beneficial electrification in buildings. She also manages the state's commercial building benchmarking program, building energy codes training and technical assistance, and energy efficiency workforce development efforts in rural and underserved areas of Colorado. So thanks, Kim, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Rob, and thanks to the Colorado Resiliency Office for putting this webinar together. We really appreciate it. I am really pleased to have these three panelists join us today to discuss the connection between building codes, climate action, resiliency, and equity. They bring a wealth of knowledge on the topic and diverse on-the-ground experience in getting new codes adopted at the local government level. They've each worked to ensure that stakeholders are brought into the process and also bought in to the process, and that they have the tools they need to comply with codes. So I'll first introduce each of our panelists and give them a few minutes to provide some background. Also wanted to go over our agenda today. So after I do introductions, we're going to talk a little bit about that connection between building codes and climate resiliency plans, talk a little bit about the effective messaging to get those stakeholders buy-in. I want to ask each of the panelists some of the biggest challenges they've had to overcome in the codes world. And then hear a little bit about any types of code adoption training and technical assistance that they've taken advantage of and what was most helpful to them. We certainly want to get to your questions as well, so please feel free to chat in questions along the way. And I'd like to leave just 3 minutes at the very end for a really quick tour of the Energy Office's Energy Code Adoption Toolkit, which is a set of resources that we have online. So if you could go to the next slide, I will introduce our three panelists. Jess Hoover is the Climate Action Director for the High Country Conservation Center, which is an environmental nonprofit in Summit County. Projects she's led include developing a countywide climate action plan, sustainable building codes, an EV readiness plan, and a bulk purchase community solar program. Jess is currently facilitating creation of a renewable energy mitigation program for the community. Our next panelist is Todd Carr. Todd is the Routt County building official serving 6 jurisdictions made up of the city of Steamboat Springs and the towns of Hayden, Yampa, Oak Creek, unincorporated Routt County, and the local school districts. He has worked through 2 full code adoptions throughout these jurisdictions over the past 4 years. Previously, Todd worked in local government roles and as a general contractor in Minnesota, Hawaii, and Iowa, which has provided him with experience working in a wide range of climate zones, seismic zones, and energy codes. And while working for the city of Dubuque, Iowa, he managed community development departments, neighborhood revitalization programs, CDBG grants and programs, lead and healthy homes programs, and resiliency grant funding and housing programs. And then finally, we're pleased to have Kristen Whitko. Kristen Whitko is from the city of Boulder, and she has 20 years of experience in mechanical engineering, sustainable consulting, energy modeling, and project management. She serves as the energy code coordinator for the city of Boulder and works closely with both the city's code officials and the Department of Climate Initiatives to ensure long-term climate goals and initiatives are supported by current building practices. So I wanted to kick it off and let each of the panelists kind of introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their jurisdiction and what codes they're on, and kind of how often they adopt new codes, or what's the current status of codes in their jurisdiction. And so I'll kick it off. I'll start with Jess.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate the introduction. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So Summit County and all of our individual jurisdictions, which include Breckenridge, Dillon, Frisco, and Silverthorne, all follow the same code adoption cycle, which we are learning is sort of unique among communities. I actually was just on a meeting with people talking about how do I get my region to be on the same code cycle. So we feel really fortunate that we are all on the same code cycle. It's a huge benefit for the contractors in our community because they're able to use the same code no matter where in the county they are building. In all of these communities, new codes are currently adopted every 6 years. So in 2020, all of the municipalities adopted the 2018 I codes. There has been some conversation about adopting the IECC on a more frequent basis, but we have not solidified anything yet, but that could be coming in our future. We would really like that to come. Last year, most of these communities also adopted a new sustainable building code. We had an existing sustainable building code that was first adopted about 10 years ago, but with subsequent I code cycles, it had actually become obsolete. We were asking people to do things in our sustainable building code that that the base code was going above and beyond. So to skip ahead a little bit in Kim's questions, just to give some context, one of the strategies in our countywide climate action plan was to adopt the new sustainable building code. And so we started a stakeholder process to develop what that might look like in 2018, knowing that 2020 was a code adoption year for our community. So we kind of wanted to dovetail these two projects together. Our stakeholder group was comprised of local government staff, local energy raters, architects, representatives from the building community, HVAC professionals, and then HC3, which I realize now I neglected to explain what HC3 is. We are an environmental nonprofit in the county, and we work on a number of things from recycling and water conservation to energy efficiency and business sustainability, but we also oversee implementation of our countywide climate action plan and really help to corral everyone together and move forward on it. During this sustainable code development process, we got technical support from the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and we ended up hiring an architectural consulting firm out of the Roaring Fork Valley to help our group determine the best path forward. We had a lot of different ideas that we ended up hashing out and narrowing down, and the whole stakeholder process was, I mean, frankly, took a good part of a year to put together, to talk about different options and figure out, what kind of sustainable code did we want to implement. Residentially, we decided that we wanted to use an established program so we wouldn't have to change the stretch code so it wouldn't become obsolete again. And so after comparing a number of options, we decided to use the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program. So For all new residential construction in the county and in all of these individual jurisdictions, they are following this DOE program, and it provides both a prescriptive path and a performance path using HERS ratings. Commercially, we had never had a sustainable code before, and the building officials wanted to work within the existing code language because of that. So we hired an engineer to model a few different options for us and ended up creating within the code itself 2 prescriptive and 1 performance pathways that would help us achieve 10% energy efficiency savings above the base 2018 code. And as I mentioned, the Climate Action Plan was the primary driver for all of this, and we are not finished. To meet our goals, we need to be building net zero energy buildings by 2030. So this was just our first step in the process, and the starting point with what the stakeholder group was comfortable with. And we are continuing conversations in the background about when will it be safe and we won't scare the pants off everyone to start talking about codes again.
I like it. Thanks, Jess. Todd, do you want to go next and talk a little bit about your jurisdictions that you cover?
Sure, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. We do appreciate your time today and hope this is beneficial to all of you listeners and participants out there. Todd Carr, Routt County Building Official. The Routt County Building Department is much along the lines, and I'd echo what Jess says. We do serve the entire county and adopt a total of 5 different building code ordinances for unincorporated Routt County, the city of Steamboat Springs, town of Oak Creek, town of Yampa, and town. And we also serve the school districts, but that's a state building code. But bottom line is we do adopt a very consistent building and energy code across the board throughout all these jurisdictions. And that really helps gain buy-in from our stakeholders, both our design professionals we work with and our contractors, by trying to keep that consistency and accuracy across those jurisdictional lines. So that helps lead to success. If you're serving multiple jurisdictions, I would definitely do your best to do that. The other thing we do here in Routt County, when I arrived in 2017, we were actually on the 2009 codes. So one of my first tasks at that time was to adopt the 2015 energy codes and building codes. We were successful in that. It definitely took some hard work and effort. At that time, some of our rural jurisdictions, unincorporated Routt, in our smaller towns of Hayden, Oak Creek, and Yampa were hesitant a little bit on the energy codes, but they did buy in through public input and support from the building department. The one item that they did delete at that time was the blower door test, where the city of Steamboat Springs moved forward with that during the 2015 code adoption. So we decided in Routt County, one of the best approaches was to move away from the 6-year cycle that had been kind of repetitively used in the past and is commonly used throughout Colorado. In my experience as a code official in Iowa, I found that adopting on a 3-year basis actually makes the process much smoother. In lieu of what people may think that it's more work, I think it's less work personally. You're making smaller leaps when you stay on a 3-year cycle. So buy-in and acceptance from your designers and your contractors becomes easier. I think your job as a code official and your staff and your department becomes smoother and easier by transitioning, making smaller leaps versus huge hurdles on a 6-year basis. So we've seen great success in that. And we were able to, for the first time, to adopt the 2018 codes on January 1st of 2021 this year. Our elected officials really thought the process went smoother than any other code adoption they'd ever seen in the past done here. And we're complimentary on the fact that we took that step on a 3-year cycle. So our intent is to continue down that path. Some of the other things when you stay on that 3-year cycle, I think, is that your staff and department are well trained and versed, because our training, as you all know, is pretty much on target with the newest code out there. So what you're doing is, as we adopted the 15 codes in January 1st of 18, by January of 2019, we were all attending 2018 code presentations and trainings through ICC and maybe Colorado Code Consultants. So you start preparing yourself and educating yourself in advance, which is very crucial because what we try to do is do public outreach and education events at minimum a year and a half, if not 2 years, before we're going to adopt the next code cycle. So first we become trained as staff and government officials, and then we move into the public sector and begin working with them. And I think that's how you strengthen and get the best buy-in and support from your design professionals and contractors, while still staying in line with suppliers and manufacturers and products that evolve and come out of code changes as well. However, we like to stay that 3 year behind the newest code, which as we know now is the 2021 codes. And I'm a firm believer in that because everything may have a few glitches here and there. I would never want to be the guinea pig and lead the charge, so to speak, on a brand new code. So by staying that 3 year cycle behind, you're allowed to see how it transpires, how it evolves in other areas of the country, those that do lead by the example, adopting the newest code. And you might be able to alter or make amendments and deletions to problems that may have transpired with some of the new code adoptions as well. So we've had good success with that philosophy up here in Routt County so far. And it really was a smooth process this past year with the code adoption. With the energy codes, this past year, we were able to get full buy-in. We made no amendments, no deletions to the energy code outside of exterior walls for residential construction. That one has always been kind of an issue with our local contractors, customers, citizens, and designers. So the energy code, as you know, in the prescriptive method would allow, would require an R5 continuous insulation to meet the prescriptive method with R20 in the cavity. So we wrote some amendments on that to offer options, which in our mind would pass through a res check or performance compliance method, and work with our local contractors to identify the issues they had with continuous insulation or the thickness of it. Up here with seismic and snow loads, some of the concerns were lateral and shear bracing when you add 2 inches of foam on the exterior of a wall. That length of the fastener becomes 3.5 inches, and then length of fasteners for siding and trim are even longer beyond that. So we offer 2 options. One is an R27 closed cell foam in the cavity would pass, or the other option would be an R3 continuous with an R22 cavity. And then we keep the regular R20 plus R5 in the code as well. That was something that went over really well with many of our contractors and local designers, offering that flexibility to the prescriptive compliance method. And I think the advantages for them when you meet the prescriptive compliance method is that they can divert going through res check to gain compliance with the energy code. When you can do that, you've saved a designer a lot of time and money. You've also cut time with your plan review examiner and inspectors by not having to go through those res check compliance reports and start calculating square footage of walls, windows, ceilings, floors, and everything else to ensure that it truly was done accurately. So all in all, we had good success with that tiny little amendment. And then I think those of you that work in the building codes will recognize that in the 2021 energy codes, ICC has offered some exceptions very much like our local amendment, and are kind of being a little more flexible with the prescriptive method in those charts. Not identical to what we did, but very similar. So that's kind of an example of how can you work through some of the problems that might exist with the energy code, but at the end of the day, come together as a group to resolve that so it works in the real world, gives people options, but doesn't lessen the effectiveness of the building envelope, so to speak, in terms of capturing and containing energy within the home. Other things that we do up here is obviously partner with private, sector businesses and local nonprofits. A few examples of that would be the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council. We work with our ski corp industry a lot up here. Those folks are strong partners and advocates when it comes to climate change up here. So it's not led really within the building department, but outside the building department. However, those are critical partners that we like to work with. And we have a lot of great experts down at the City of Steamboat Springs that really focus on water resiliency, water usage, things of that nature, stormwater runoff, and other things that get incorporated into maybe municipal codes or county codes, policies outside of the building department. But they are critical partners of ours, and we work together as a team to support the overall effort. In calendar 2020, we were successful partnering with the City of Steamboat Springs and the county departments and getting a Soul Smart designation. So we've seen a rapid growth and increase in solar panel installation throughout all of Routt County over the 4 years that I've been here. And so we went after this Soul Smart application, and we were provided back a silver designation with Soul Smart. And that was a partnership with the elected officials of City of Steamboat Springs and our county commissioners here at Routt County, and all community development departments as well. So one way that we can offer incentives and to incentivize solar is to work together as a team and county and city departments. So we increased some permit fee reductions beyond House Bill 1199, which obviously limits building department permit and plan review fees based on residential and commercial construction. But the City of Steamboat Springs went a step further, and they reduced their local city permit fee to $0 on solar permits. As community development departments, we develop processes and checklists on submittal requirements, and we narrowed down the plan review for any solar roof or ground mount system to a 5 working day review guaranteed. So that's another way to incentivize solar permitting, is that we're going to try to make it fast and streamlined for the public. We offer a lot of classes and outreach and support on what makes a solid submittal. What do we need from you to complete that in 5 working days? And we work with our professionals and engineers and solar contractors to make sure they understand what's required for a full submittal as well.
Hey Todd, if I could break in here, I just wanted to make sure we can get to some other questions and have Kristen speak too. And so much great information. I love how you've been able to make the code a little bit more flexible to get buy-in for all the stakeholders.
You bet. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to turn it over to Kristen now to talk a little bit about City of Boulder.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kristen Whitko from the City of Boulder, as Kim said. I work at the city in a position that we've created called the Energy Code Coordinator. And so I kind of work over 2 departments. And I work with our planning department where the building permits happen, where Todd works. And then I also work with our climate initiatives department, which develops our climate action policy. Boulder has a long history of having a really aggressive energy policy, everything from stormwater management to solar to energy efficiency codes and programs. And so we spend a lot of time looking at our energy code because we really see our energy code as one of our strongest tools to achieving our energy efficiency goals. I don't know, Kim, if you can bring up the slides, if we can flip those. Yeah, oh, perfect. So this is just a slide showing, in Boulder, we adopt our building codes every 6 years on a 6-year cycle. But on the energy code, we've committed to adopting a new code every 3 years. In 2016, we came up with a climate action plan, which we're continuing to work on. And that climate action plan identified a goal of getting to net zero energy codes, outcome verified net zero energy codes by 2031. And so to get there, the idea is that we put out a new energy code every 3 years that helps us incrementally step towards that ultimate goal of a net zero energy code. And the outcome verified piece is, a lot of cities are starting to adopt some folks call them building performance standards that start to look at your existing building stock and set goals for existing buildings. And so eventually we sort of see the energy code and that existing building program merging as one, and that's sort of where the outcome based. So eventually we're looking at, you know, the utility bills of these buildings ultimately, and making sure that they're not just meeting code on paper, but that they're actually operating and performing as net zero energy buildings by the time we get to 2031, which is still a long way out. And we have a lot of things to address between now and then with regards to building electrification and grid compatibility, and there's lots of factors, which is why we've committed to this 3-year cycle for our energy code, so that we can really incrementally attack all of those things that need to happen between now and a net zero energy code. And then if you flip to the next slide, I would also say that we're in the middle of this process of taking another look at our climate action plan and really taking a look at it through the lens of equity more and more. And what has come up with that discussion is the need to really look at low-income housing and equitable housing. And so our requirements for our residential energy code are really based on square footage. So this shows our requirements across the x-axis is square footage, and across the y-axis is the energy rating index, the ERI, which is the same as a HERS score people are probably more familiar with. And so the bigger the home, the more stringent our requirements are. And the idea is that, you know, the folks building larger homes, you know, the affordability issue isn't quite as acute as it is in the homes in the 0 to 2,000 square foot range. So we've kind of started to tailor our code to look at that. But more and more we're looking at that. We're looking at ways to subsidize some of these improvements, because it is, you know, there is a cost benefit analysis that happens with every time we vary something from the national code, where we're really looking at, you know, what the cost implications of that change are, and trying to justify it and trying to figure out how we subsidize the sectors that find it more difficult to meet those requirements. And you can also see some interest, the electrification threshold on this graph as well is kind of interesting. In the state of Colorado, we have a 120% rule. You can't put more solar on a home than 120% of your electrical load. So if you have a requirement to get to an energy rating index of anything less than 20, roughly, it's really an all electric home as well. So, you know, just lots of things start to intersect with the energy code. There's affordability, there's electrification, there's energy efficiency, and, you know, we're trying to strike a balance with all of those things in our codes. So this shows our code in 2017 is the blue line. Our current code is the orange line, and then future codes will continue to just step that ERI requirement down until ultimately the 2031 is the green bar across the bottom, which is, you know, a net zero energy home. And that's pretty much all I have. I'll, you know, turn it back to you, Kim, and we can maybe take some questions.
Great, thank you so much. I was wondering, I wanted to throw out there, and Rob, you can probably take down the slideshow for now, but wanted to ask the other panelists, Jess or Todd, if equity and affordability has come up in your discussions around building codes and energy codes. Jess, if you want to start.
Sorry, there might be a cameo from my cat. So
it wouldn't be a webinar if there wasn't a cat cameo.
Right?
So we welcome it.
Yes. So that was a big topic of conversation during our stakeholder meetings and adoption, and frankly continues to be an ongoing conversation, is that these code changes will increase costs. And there's, especially now, there's a lot of concern in the building community that it just costs so much to build anyway. So there is a lot of pushback, and adding extra layers on top of that, increasing things even more. When it comes to workforce housing, and just a brief explanation for those on the phone who might not have it, in our community, because the cost of housing is so high, we do have a lot of neighborhoods that are restricted to the local workforce, and the construction of these neighborhoods is often subsidized by local government. And then, you know, there's a deed restriction on them. They can only be sold to people who live and work in the county. And then there's also a cap on appreciation. So all of our municipalities and our elected officials really care about the local workforce, and especially decreasing energy costs for our locals, right? These are people for whom we don't want them to be cost burdened by their energy bills. And so building homes that they can not only afford to buy, but then also afford to live in is really important. So increasing the energy efficiency of our workforce housing not only helps the workforce actually afford to live here and afford their monthly bills, but also helps us to meet our carbon reduction goals. So, with these code increases, that might mean that if we are working towards net zero codes towards the future, our local municipalities may have to subsidize more of the cost of these developments, or find other sources of funding in order to be able to do so. Because like I said, everyone agrees that it's not equitable to saddle the local workforce with higher energy bills than they need.
Great. Todd, I didn't know if you had anything to add there.
Yeah, I mean, cost always comes up, right? I think the National Home Builders Association kind of tries to lead the charge when it comes to energy codes and participating in those discussions with ICC and the committee that adopts those codes. So they do a good job of, I guess, looking out for the contractors. I think in today's market right now, I mean, construction materials throughout every single code we adopt are off the charts. And I don't know that I would pinpoint it on the energy codes at this point that have caused these major cost increases. So this go around, we didn't have too much trouble with complaints on costs going from the 15 energy code to the 18. Now the 21 might be a little different scenario. We got some big upgrades coming. But again, I mean, construction goes up on average, I think in normal years, every spring, 4 to 6% of materials. So, I mean, are there little add-ons? Yes, but that happens across the board, not just in the energy codes. And I think it's somewhat of a myth if someone wants to blame the energy codes on cost of, construction cost increases as the only contributing factor. So I think there's ways to show that your efficiency that you add to a building actually pays for itself over time. Whereas other codes, that's hard to show, right? How do you get that return on investment back? And so I think it's more of a myth than reality, personally.
That's great. I mean, that's definitely one of the talking points that we like to repeat, is that the energy code is the only code with a return on investment. So I'd like to, on that point, I'd like to turn to talking a little bit more about messaging and the outreach that you've each had to do in your communities, and how that messaging might have differed between different types of constituents, and what you found was most effective in getting their buy-in. Kristen, do you want to start with you?
Sure, yeah. Every code adoption cycle starts with a very large community outreach program that we try and get buy-in from all sorts of folks. We talk a lot with the architectural community, a lot with the building professionals in our community, the contractors, the developers. We even get a lot of homeowners that will come out, because I would say 80% of our permits in Boulder are remodels and renovations. And, the energy code impacts those folks as well. So we spend a lot of time on outreach, and it's kind of a mixed bag. It's really hard to get people to think forward to the next code cycle. Everyone's very wrapped up in what the current requirements are. So figuring out how to engage the community before these codes take effect and to really get their feedback. Todd's story of the rigid insulation and those prescriptive tweaks that they were able to make and successfully broker with their community is really a great example of what we try to do. But it's not always easy to get people's attention. People are really hard at work on what they're working on and don't have a lot of time to work with the city on the next code, but we certainly do try.
Yeah, great points. Todd or Jess, if you want to jump in.
Sure. So when we were messaging to the elected officials, we focused primarily on environmental impacts, and you know, talked a lot about the climate action plan and how you know, our new sustainable building code was a direct outcome of that plan. And if that we were going to be serious about meeting the goals we all adopted, we really needed to do something to address the building codes. But they were also hearing a lot from the building community. So we did also have to emphasize that we put a significant amount of work into figuring out that ROI. We modeled the cost impacts of our new sustainable building code. We took 3 sample homes that were real homes and modeled, here's the 2018 code, here's the 2018 performance pathway, here's the Zero Energy Ready Home program, looked at all the components, had builders in our stakeholder group cost them out, and then calculated what was the cost increase from, you know, for all these different pathways, and then what were the projected energy savings, and then what was the ROI. So that was really helpful for, you know, the elected officials, just to give them a high level overview. And then we also had to remind people again, because this, you know, workforce housing kept coming up over and over again. We also reminded our elected officials that the local workforce is not building custom homes. The biggest impact to these code changes is on the custom homes. And so people who can afford to build multi-million-dollar homes can afford to put more insulation in their walls. And ultimately it's going to benefit them too, because we know that those bigger homes consume more energy. For the contractors and the builders, we talked a lot about flexibility, because, you know, they were really used to following prescriptive code pathways. And so we're really trying to push them to, especially for Zero Energy Ready Home, using the performance pathway, because they have options. Like Todd was talking about the continuous insulation issue, and a lot of builders here are really nervous about it too. But using the performance pathway, you can adjust what you're doing. You can play with those insulation levels in your walls to still hit the target HERS score for the program without doing continuous insulation. So you can find trade-offs that are frankly often more cost effective. It's a switch, because you have to do a lot more work at the beginning of the process and work with your designer to do the modeling. So, you know, there are some growing pains with working all of this out at the beginning. But again, we're really trying to emphasize with them, there's more flexibility in it, and it can be more cost effective for you to do that. Like I said, we did all those cost comparisons, and we shared them out too. There continues to be concerns about costs. I wrote down what Todd said about, you know, construction costs go up 4 to 6% every year anyway. I actually just have had an email pop in from one of my colleagues who was in a meeting with a builder who was saying that the codes, you know, made the cost of construction go up more than we predicted. But when he was pushed back on it, it wasn't actually the codes, it was increased cost of materials and labor. So builders are seeing increased cost, but it's not necessarily the codes that are causing it. Other outreach we did for the builders was we offered a 6-part training series on the Zero Energy Ready Home program to really help builders and designers become more familiar with it, even though obviously it was going to be easier for them to learn it once they started doing it. At least they had some basic familiarity with it. And we built in a 6-month training period to the Sustainable Building Code implementation, so that if their first project, if there were some small details that were off and they, you know, didn't quite pass muster for the program, they could still get CO. You know, we were using it as a learning process for them, so they would feel comfortable. And in fact, based on builder feedback, that training period has been extended for a full calendar year. We also provided local incentives for energy professionals to become HERS raters. So we helped, that was another concern from the building community, that there wouldn't be enough HERS raters. Well, we hosted a HERS rater training locally, offset part of the tuition, thanks to the energy office, for people who took that HERS rater training class. So we now have a handful of local HERS raters that can support the program in the community. And this, of course, was all residential. We don't have a lot of large commercial builders based here in Summit County. So, hey, there was no pushback on that part. So that was easy.
Thanks, Jess. Todd, did you have anything to add? And especially you have a diversity of communities in your area too, with some obviously the pretty rural communities, and Steamboat I consider a little bit on the more progressive side. So how did you have to modify any of your messaging to all those different communities?
You know, we are diverse up here in Rock County, without a doubt. When you go into our smaller towns, and we have ranches, and in the city of Steamboat Springs, as you mentioned, but we have been very fortunate in working with all of our elected officials at the local town levels, the city and the county commissioners. And I think, you know, we got their buy-in on keeping consistency across the board with our codes because of support from the community themselves and the contractors and the design professionals. So the last thing you want to do is drive 15 miles to work on a design of a house and have to open up a whole different code book, right? So really, quite honestly, I didn't have to do much as a building official. That idea and concept was really sold by the private sector, right? And that's that partnership piece that's so important. I always say with any regulatory department, even outside of the energy codes, is we have to work effectively with the public. Codes and regulations are black and white. There's always gray in the middle. And that's that common ground that we need to work together in collaboration efforts, right? And that's really what we try to do up here. That's all I can say. I mean, it really wasn't that difficult, so.
Well, that's great. That's a success story. I'm going to take a question that came in through Q&A, and I'll read it out to the panelists here. The attendee says, codes are great, but how do you ensure they are implemented effectively? I have seen some terrible housing built under strict building codes. Inspections were intermittent, and builders know how to make it look good for an inspector's visit. Or a blower door test is only implemented in sample homes in a development, not all of them. We need to make sure that everyone is committed to making the codes real. Does anyone want to jump in and respond to that?
Yeah, I would agree with this statement. It's going to go dependent upon the jurisdiction maybe that you're building within, right? I mean, as a former contractor, I think we could all say we've suffered some what we would have called as contractors drive-by inspections, right? But it's really up to the jurisdiction that's performing that plan review. And after that plan review is done, what comes next, and that's field inspections, is so critical and important. And working with the private sector when it comes to blower door tests, and making sure that those that are performing those tests we have a policy where they have to be BPI or ResNet certified, right? They have to be third party. You can't be related to the project somehow. So, and our inspectors do a great job through training, right? And techniques of what are we going to look for. I'm really proud of our inspectors up here. They do a great job. They're thorough, but we also have a great working relationship with our contractors as well, and offer them training and education on how to provide that proper insulation, right, within the cavities, and what are we going to be looking for. Just to give you an idea, I mean, we performed just under 10,000 inspections last year. In doing so, we offer next day inspections and cover 2,400 square miles. Not easy, but we do a very thorough job, and we want to get out there and see the job. Now, some jurisdictions might want to see all those inspections, but maybe can't offer next day. And that can create feuding, right? Because you're slowing a project down. So we would rather go out and do 10 partial inspections and make sure we see everything than one final quick inspection, is how we kind of solve that problem.
Yeah, I would just chime in with, you know, that as the code evolves, there's more and more kind of documentation that has to come back to the building department. The air leakage testing is one, you know, that testing results need to be reviewed by someone. Commissioning, we're now requiring, the energy code requires commissioning, third-party commissioning on commercial projects. So that really needs to be reviewed. And then the other thing is, you know, the performance building compliance path requiring an ERI or a HERS score. That final confirmed certificate needs to get reviewed also. So really setting up a process within your planning department to allow that paperwork to smoothly be resubmitted or submitted so that it can be reviewed by the folks that did the plan review is something that we've been working out at the City of Boulder.
Great, thank you. I wanted to ask each of you if you could describe the biggest challenge you had to overcome and what that solution was regarding codes, or if that's too hard, what advice would you give other local governments who are listening to this call today? And whoever wants to start, let's go to Jess. I'll just pick someone.
Well, the advice is a good question. Challenges, I think that I've mentioned them. You know, it's increasing costs and increasing or changing processes, and I think that kind of goes along with what I think our biggest overarching challenge is, just a general hesitancy to change, right? There are some people who don't like being told how to build. They've been building, you know, for years and years and years, and they don't appreciate someone else telling them what to do, and that can be difficult. So for us, and I guess this is the advice that I would give too, we have been really trying to put forth our, you know, best faith efforts to listen to these concerns and then attempt to deliver services that address them. And so, for example, with offering this training series on the new codes, with offering this now year-long training period for first-time permit poolers so that they can learn the program and feel confident building to the new code. These are things that we have implemented, and frankly, the builders do really appreciate the building period, and especially the training period and the extension of it. So while we can't really do anything about the costs, you know, trying to listen to those other concerns and figure out how can we make this as easy as possible for them.
Great. Who wants to go next?
I'll jump in. I kind of have more of this kind of echoing what Jess says. I think the biggest barrier that we run into is the cost effectiveness piece. But, you know, reiterating that return on investment, what they're getting for their money, I think is really helpful. And then also providing resources and trying to be as flexible and available to our customers as we can, because our codes are changing so fast. You know, it can be really frustrating for people to keep up. They constantly feel like as soon as they have their arms around this code, we're moving on to the next one. And then they know there's another one coming in 3 years. So trying to be understanding of that and, you know, do as much hand holding as we can, but also make it, you know, have enough resources out there so people can really get their arms around it. Because people generally want to do the right thing, but oftentimes it's confusing. The energy code is, you know, this thick now, and it's very complicated. And so I think just being as flexible and available as possible is the best we can do with it.
And Todd, do you have any other advice?
Yeah, I would agree exactly with what Jess and Kristen just said, and it's all about service, right? Being available and advanced public outreach and education, and providing that as far in advance as that code adoption as you can, because it's important for all of us to remember that contractors are more than likely putting together proposals a year to year and a half out right now. And so you can't throw them curveballs and blindside them at the last minute. That's what's going to cause the frustration. So working in advance, offering that education and training as best as possible. And like some of the best training is on site, right? Get your hands dirty kind of training on a construction project. So if you're able as a local jurisdiction to work with one of your, construction performance specialists that would do blower door testing and things of that nature, or do installation work, offer an on-site live training. I mean, that goes a long ways. You can record it, you get participation that day of the training, and it's locally and people respect that. And I think it goes a long ways as well. We had good success with that.
That's great. That kind of leads into my next question about what kinds of training or assistance did you take advantage of, and what was most helpful? It sounds like the in the field training is really useful for folks out there. And what do you need more of, or assistance from the state?
I'll just plug the Energy Office's technical assistance again, because we did work with the Energy Office on the 6-part training series that we hosted for architects and contractors in our community. And it would have been really great to have brought our speaker up to the county, but we were doing this prime COVID time, so it was all online. But those resources are out there for people. They're still linked on our website. So anybody in our community who wants to revisit one of the videos and you know, kind of dig into some of the nitty gritty about the codes is able to do it.
And Kristen, did you have any other training?
Yeah, I would also plug the Colorado Energy Office. You guys have hosted the lunchtime seminars, and those have been really helpful. We've pointed, design professionals to them. We've also pointed our inspection staff. Some of those have been really helpful. We also try and do a lot of in-house training with our plan review team as well as our inspection staff. It's a mix.
Awesome. Well, and we're always willing to hear more ideas for what communities need. Rob, I think we can go to our next slide then, bring up the slides about the toolkit and the other resources we have available. Yeah, I just wanted to make everyone aware of our energy code adoption toolkit that we have on our website. It's available on our main website. Just select climate. There's a little bit of a pathway to go to it, and I would do a live tour of it, but I'm not that savvy with with the webinar, so I don't want to mess that up. But this is a snapshot of the toolkit. It is designed for a variety of folks, whether you're a building official or staff, designer, contractor, energy consultant, different communities. You can go to the next slide. And just wanted to emphasize, we have several resources and links to the role of energy codes and resilience. This actually comes from an International Code Council report. I thought this was a great graphic. It just talks about how the energy code works in tandem with other model codes to obviously strengthen energy efficiency, provide extreme weather protection, fire safety, moisture management, and durability, and all of those really lead to more resilient buildings. You can go to the next slide. Oh, thanks for putting in the link too, Rob. We have a lot of resources about how to navigate the code adoption process itself. Whether it's how you can get involved actually in joining a committee through the International Code Council to get to actually submit ideas for provisions in the code. And also we have resources on what happens after the code adoption. What does a sample implementation plan look like? So we provide technical assistance on that as well. Next slide. We also produce all kinds of documents and resources that outline the significant changes, both in the commercial and the residential codes. We have code comparison documents all the way from 2009 to 2021. So that is another helpful resource. Next slide. We have costs came up a lot and about the payback. So we have some data and information as well on the toolkit about what you can expect for the upfront costs to a building department, as well as what you can expect in the payback. Next slide. And I am going through a pretty quick tour here, but we also have a lot of sample language and example language from other jurisdictions' ordinances and amendments that they have included in their codes, whether it's the Zero Energy Ready Homes amendment that Summit County included, to other EV ready charging amendments or requirements. So you can find some of that language right in this toolkit. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Next slide. And also we've created a lot of compliance resources as well. Last year, about this time, we put together a troubleshooting interpretation guide because we just thought, working with our subject matter experts who do a lot of our training, we found that there's a lot of commonly asked questions that we get around how the energy code interacts with the other I codes and how to interpret the mechanical, electrical envelope and additional efficiency package code measures. So it provides some clarity on compliance and enforcement roadblocks that a lot of jurisdictions across Colorado have experienced. So we hope that provides some good information there as well, along with all of these other guides that I have listed. And next slide. And then both Kristen and Jess mentioned our trainings. We finally have gotten a YouTube channel, yay. So it makes it a little bit easier to watch the recordings. We have recorded trainings for a while, but they weren't super accessible or as easily viewed. But we did put them on YouTube now. So you can click on these links. We've listed them out on our website for each training. So you can go to YouTube. Some of them also have the accompanying slides as well. And you can view those on YouTube. They're about an hour long. Next year, our goal is to create more bite-sized recordings and trainings. So maybe, 5 to 10 minute little trainings that people can click on, because we know everyone's busy and the last thing you might want to do is sit down for an hour and watch a recorded training for something. So we're trying to figure out how to make these just more accessible and, little 10 minute or so segments. So if you have ideas on that, please feel free to forward them to me and we'll get working on that for this next year. And next slide. And then just wanted to say that I just saw this come up. As you know, there was some controversy over the energy code in this past year. So the International Code Council did take away the option for local governments to vote on the energy code. So there will no longer be this governmental consensus voting process, but you can apply to be on the Residential Energy Code Consensus Committee or the Commercial Energy Code Consensus Committee. So there's a link in here to do that. And you need to apply by Friday, April 23rd, if you want to participate in that. And then Todd, I thought you wanted to mention one other thing about the Department of Energy annual conference. Sorry, I didn't know if you wanted to.
Oh, I wanted to plug the state for their efforts in getting that conference out here. I think that was May of 19. I remember that, right, in Denver, but that was a great conference. Really enjoyed it. And what I did enjoy about that is it definitely paved the future, made us really aware of what's coming down the pipeline, and probably similar to what has led to this, to get out of the voting mechanism with the energy code and go to more of a committee base, so that I think we stay on target for both federal, national, and state level goals of reducing energy. But yeah, it was a great conference.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we're right about time now, so I don't see any other questions that have come in, but feel free to contact the Resiliency Office or myself if you have any additional questions, and I can get the questions forwarded to the panelists. But we really appreciate your time today. Great job by all the panelists. We shared some great insights into code adoption and how to move forward. So I really appreciate everyone's time today. And Rob, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Just want to extend a thank you to Kim for moderating today's session, and thank you to Kristen, Todd, and Jess for joining and sharing your experiences and knowledge with our audience today. This has been a really great session, really informative, and just appreciate your time. Just want to plug our next session in the webinar series, which will be Energy Resiliency Through Microgrids. We're hosting that on May 5th from 12 to 1. You can sign up for that webinar session at our website. Again, that's coresiliency.com/webinars. You can sign up for that, and then the following sessions in this series. And again, you can see all of the recorded sessions in this series as well. We'll be posting this recording in the next couple of days, so just be on the lookout for that. And just want to say thank you and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.